to the Evolving Media podcast, a podcast where we take a look at the ever-changing world of media and where it might be heading, and how everyone interested in it can adapt their own thinking in order to thrive in the future. As always, if you find this interesting, do rate, comment, share and subscribe. It'll help us do more of all this. In this episode of Evolving Media, we'll be delving into the education sphere. My guest today is Houston Howard, who is a professor at the LA Film School, teaching up-and-coming filmmakers the art of making successful projects with a transmedia mindset at the fore. Welcome. Okay, so Houston, you're in your daily profession, you're amongst other things, a professor at the LA Film School and teaching transmedia to students, right?
Yes, I've been at the LA Film School for, I guess, about four years now, and I was able to create a transmedia class that then became two transmedia classes that then we got an entire bachelor's program in transmedia design and transmedia storytelling accredited, which is yet to roll out, but they're super excited about it here at the school. And so yeah, a lot of really interesting things going on in the educational space within the transmedia design spectrum.
I mean, it's Generation Z people that you are teaching, right? From your point of view, how are they approaching the media world we see evolving today? You know,
it's really interesting because every day I'm talking to 18-year-olds, 25-year-olds, and they engage with entertainment completely different than my generation, and I'm not much older than them, but it's really interesting to see just in a 20-year difference or 15-year difference, they just how differently they engage with entertainment just broadly. It's one thing that's interesting is the way they listen to music. For example, most of them, they build YouTube playlists to listen to music, and that's how they listen to music. They don't necessarily use Apple Music or Spotify as much. They just build a YouTube playlist, which I think is really interesting. They watch, obviously they're very much into streaming. They rarely watch broadcast TV. Commercials are very foreign to them. Even things like just the other day, I was talking about The Matrix and Fight Club. And about they're in that year when Matrix and Fight Club came out, and the differences between the two. And there was a student that said, you know what, I haven't seen either one of those things because I don't watch old movies. And that was like a big brick to the face, because I was like, oh, I don't feel like The Matrix or Fight Club, I don't feel like they're old movies, but that was 20 years ago. And this particular person wasn't alive when The Matrix came out. And when I was 18 or 19, I didn't watch movies before, really didn't watch a lot of films that were made before I came out. So it's really interesting just in the spectrum of things, just to see the new generation and how differently they interact. They watch a lot of anime, which is really interesting, like massive amounts of anime. So yeah, you just have a whole different mindset, a whole different way to engage with entertainment, the whole different way of just consuming entertainment that is now forcing, I think, creators that are more mature, that are in the marketplace creating this content. The more you understand the mindset of these people and how they consume and how they engage and how they create, how they like to create, then obviously it's going to change your process, moving forward.
So how do you teach them then? I mean, what do these kids or young people, what do they need to learn? What does your curriculum look like?
So I'm very much a proponent of, you have to change the mindset of people before you can teach them practical skills. There's this really interesting quote that I can't remember off the top of my head exactly, but it's and I even can't remember who said it, but the thrust of it is, before you give people the wood and the nails to build a ship, you have to create in them the desire to cross the sea. And so when you're teaching at a film school, it's easy to kind of jump into like the below the line skills of this is how we extend stories across platform, and this is how we do this and how we do that, like the practical side of it. But I always like to front end the curriculum with, this is the state of the world today. This is the state of the industry today. This is how the world's changing. And you have to figure out, I mean, they're going to be entering in 3 years when they graduate film school, they're going to be entering into to an industry that will probably be different than how they start when they started film school. Yeah. And they have to be ready for the rapid change. And it's not like it was going to film school in the 80s or the 90s. Now, even the software they're going to be learning, the cameras that they're shooting on in school, it's going to be different technology. And so that they're going to use. So they have to understand the changing world, the rapid pace that it's changing, the need to be able to be light and efficient and understand sort of the core principle of story, and how even though technology changes, story is sort of this ever present thing that is always consistent. Now the trick is just contextualizing story for all these new platforms. But I have all these film students that are so focused on becoming Tarantino and Scorsese and all these guys that yeah. I have to convince, and that's great, and that's not a bad dream, and I hope they do. But what I try to get across to them is you have to recognize that things like AI and machine learning and cryptocurrency and the blockchain and the Internet of Things, all of this stuff is going to completely change the marketplace for you, and that's going to impact your day-to-day life in a way that never impacted Scorsese and never impacted Tarantino, and you have to be prepared for it. And so at first, what I get is this horrified depression that sort of comes over the room of like, oh my God, this seems like this seems like dark and depressing and sort of foreboding. But then I pick it back up but at the same time, there's this tremendous opportunity of, you have more platforms than ever before. People are consuming more entertainment than ever before. There's so much more that you can do. There's so many other tools in the toolbox that you guys have that people in my generation never had. I mean, so letting them understand how much opportunity there is and how they have an advantage both in creation and distribution that their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents never had before. All of human history have never had these opportunities before. This is a very special time. Right now, we live in this 10-year window where we have this tremendous democratization of technology, democratization of distribution chains that no one has ever had the opportunity to use. And what's awesome about it is people who are 18, who are 20, they have grown up natively with this technology. And so they have a head start. They don't have to learn it. They already know it. And so that then builds this really tremendous excitement of, okay, cool. Like I don't have to just pick one thing to do. I now have a toolkit with a bunch of different tools that I can learn. And that's really freeing, because today it's very rare that you just find somebody who's only good at one thing. Yeah. Maybe if they're like in the 50 plus crowd, maybe. But when you're talking about 18 to 20 to 25 year olds, everybody can shoot video. Everybody can kind of mix music somehow, like in a GarageBand style of understanding how to put audio together. Everybody can take a picture. Everybody can make a website. They're multi-talented in all these different fields. Everybody knows how to use a computer, how to use tablets, how to use all this stuff. And when you convince them and help them realize that when you become a filmmaker, you don't just have to pick one thing to do and just all you can do is make movies the rest of your life, that you can actually use the breadth of your skill set. All of a sudden, that's really freeing. And really, it's creating a polymath mindset in the minds of the students. That's really super cool. Because I had a guy that was in my class a couple months ago, and he said he came from an IT background. He spent 2-3 years in the military. focused on IT. And when he went to film school, he thought he had to give up his IT background to become a filmmaker. And in the transmedia mindset, like, no, use that. Like, you be a filmmaker, but figure out how to leverage the IT skill set to now augment and improve your filmmaking in some way. You know, he was a web developer, all this stuff. I'm like, okay, the first step is now making really cool interactive websites that go along with your movies. And all of a sudden, you know, you're in that transmedia space, leveraging all of your skills. You know, like whether, you know, they may be a filmmaker, but they know how to play piano. They may be a filmmaker, but they know how to, they're painters, right? They're hobby artists on the side. I had a student who grew up as a metal worker with her dad. She knows how to like shape and create metal art, right? And like welding and all this stuff. And I'm like, man, that's your superpower. Make movies, but somehow figure out how to contextually connect it to this like metal art that you create. And all of a sudden, like, nothing is wasted in a transmedia model. When you get them to realize that, there's this tremendous amount of excitement that takes place. And then once you create that level of excitement, then now you can start teaching the practical skills of how to extend a story across platform.
So do you feel that the nature of universities or places like LA Film School and other places, are they changing, and do they have to change? When I'm looking at the university world over here in Finland, which I'm fairly, and Europe, which I'm, know some stuff about, at least, I see that there is a need to start changing with the times, not only to cater for how students are entering into the university world and what they expect of it, and how to fulfill those expectations, but also how to prepare those students for what the world they're going to be working and living in after their studies. So do you feel there is a transition going on over at your place and in other film schools as well?
Sure, I think so, and I think the larger scope of higher education, and I'm a product of higher education. I got my JD, and I'm still paying back student loans. I'm still in that higher education world, and I think largely higher education is not really preparing, and the model isn't built for the new world. And what we're going to see outside of credentialing students, what you're going to see, because there's certain things you need a degree for. You want to be a teacher, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer, you have to get degrees to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. But for outside of the credentialing aspect of higher education, I think what you're going to see is more and more people, especially with the increasing amount of student debt that is becoming a problem worldwide, especially here in the U.S. It's like crushing amounts of student debt. I think what you're going to see is a disruption, a bubble that will burst in higher education that is going to be a problem, just like the auto industry sort of needed bailing out. I think higher education is going to need that, because what the calculus of the students is they say, okay, I can either go to college. I'm presuming outside of the credentialing aspects, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to, rack up $40,000, $100,000, $150,000 of student debt. Yeah. Right. I'm going to go out and get a $40,000 job, a $40,000 a year job, start to chip away at my student loans when there's been a democratization and a commoditization of knowledge. And this is what I get with students all the time, is they say, there's so many books available. YouTube is the greatest educational platform on the history of mankind. You can learn anything on earth on YouTube. And they say, how do I can learn all this stuff on YouTube, and then I have the tools to create, I have the tools to distribute. Why do I now need to go to college? And this, I think, as knowledge becomes more readily available, as knowledge becomes even more commoditized in the future, things like in the entertainment space, things like Masterclass, right? It's really interesting. For like $100, I can take a class from Aaron Sorkin. So why do I need to go, to USC to rack up my student debt just to learn from a professor there? And this is the problem with that higher education is facing. Now, what's great about LA Film School is LA Film School has a really interesting model. They're more forward thinking, and they see this problem, and so they're really focused on not only preparing for students for the new world, but they're really focused on how do we give students an experience that they can't get on YouTube. Because they're going to get some stuff on YouTube, like the technical below the line stuff. But now, what else can we give them that can't be commoditized? And part of that is, you get the experience with the other students, the feedback from the professors. There's all these things that can't be commoditized. But then they're also looking at the curriculum and saying, okay, in addition to the traditional filmmaking, to the traditional entertainment business, let's start adding in sort of, forward-thinking curriculums such as transmedia storytelling that can now make them more light and efficient, that can prepare them for the changing world, no matter, if AI takes over, if how machine learning impacts, whether the blockchain impacts this or disrupts this, what the distribution lines will change. If you create in themselves a philosophy of creation and a mindset that allows them to be liquid in an ever-changing industry, now they're going to be prepared. That's stuff that I think LA Film School has been really great at. The Art Center of Design is another university in Pasadena that's leaning heavily into that. I'm helping them set up a transmedia curriculum in their school as well for the same reason. But more of the traditional university, especially the traditional film school, USC, UCLA, AFI. I feel like they're struggling in a lot of ways. The students that come out of those programs, unless you're the top tier students that immediately get placed into the sort of that top 1% of the industry. I feel like in a lot of ways they're zoo animals where they're like, while they're in school, they're rock stars and it's great. But they're like a zoo, they're a zoo animal that's then released into the wild, and they're totally not prepared for it. And they take 5 to 10 years to figure out the way forward. But within that same time frame, they still got to pay their student loans back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think there's a disservice that happens in those, with the traditional education. But traditional universities, I think, are slower to adopt newer models than something like an LA Film School.
So talking about preparing, if you back it up a little bit, those people who have not yet entered your film school or any other film school, but as we know, most of them have knowledge of, as you would say, most of them have knowledge of how to take photos, how to shoot videos, if it's only with their phones in a way. But if you're an aspiring media creator, how do you prepare for a career in the field? Or is it a film school that is the best place to go to? Or should you or is it a forge your own path as a YouTuber or something else? Or what kind of people do you feel will succeed in the end?
Sure. I mean, I think you can't make a decision holistically for everybody. There's not one good answer. It depends on a lot of factors, right? It depends on whether are you taking on debt? Are you not taking on debt? I mean, what LA Film School is really good about is they have a really good pipeline into veterans that have access to the GI Bill. That after they leave the military, they're coming back they're going back to school. They're learning film school trade, and it's paid for through the GI Bill. I think that is tremendous. Are your parents independently wealthy? Are you working while you're in school to pay your bill? How much debt are you taking on? There's all these variables that go into the decision of whether film school is right for you. And I don't think it has to be a binary choice. I don't think it has to be should I be a YouTuber? Should I start my own podcast? Should I do all this stuff independently, or should I go to film school? I think it can be both. I think I'm always a big advocate of having students don't just outsource your entire career just to the film school. While you're in film school, be creating, be building, be preparing for when you get out of film school. Don't just start at square one the day after you graduate. Let's go ahead and start building and creating. And if the film program that you go into or the school that you go into can give you something that you can't get on YouTube, then I think it's going to be a viable opportunity, factoring in the debt scenario as well, right? One of the things that really stood out to me when I was watching the Oscars, which I rarely watch the Oscars, watched them this year, and I was really interested to see if Black Panther won Best Picture, honestly. And when Black Panther won an Oscar for the best score, the composer, the first thing the composer did when he got on stage was he thanked Ryan Coogler, which I thought he just thanking the director. But really what was really interesting, he said, I remember when we were roommates in film school and I was working with you as like on your films in film school. Like, who would have thought we would have been here today winning an Oscar? And I thought that's a tremendous benefit of film school is the ROI of film school is obviously there's some below the line experience that you need. But if you put a focus on the network that you build with other creators and the collaborators, that is a tremendous asset because you don't know who's going to pop, right? You don't know who's going to be put on by somebody or by a studio or whatever. And if you ingrain yourself in a network and you're a good collaborator and you're a good person and you're a hard worker and you make friends and you're talented, then all of a sudden when you graduate, you're not by yourself. And especially in a town like Hollywood, it's really easy to feel lonely, and it's a very difficult place to network authentically. And if you build like authentic connection while you're in school, I think that can be a tremendous asset. I think the big, like if I was going in film school today, obviously I would make connections with the people in my program, but I would make an extra effort to reach out to the game developers and to the animators and to the people who are into the music program and figure out cross-platform, cross-disciplinary collaboration and networking while you're in school. All of a sudden, that gives you a whole other level of asset when you're going out. So I think it depends on the school. So if the school, like LA Film School has a film program, they have an entertainment business program, they have an animation program, they have a visual effects program, they have a music production program, an audio recording program. They're very diversified, video game, the whole thing. They're very diversified across platform. That becomes very attractive to me if I'm a prospective student to say, okay, cool. Now not only can I network within my own space, I can now sort of reach out and have an army of people that are operating in different sectors of the entertainment industry that I can leverage and lean on once I get out. I think that's super, super effective. So if you're going to a film school that doesn't have a diversity program, I think you factor that in.
I would also argue that it's, as you were saying, with the girl who did welding before she came to your course. I would argue that, for instance, hooking up with or engaging with people who know a lot about, for instance, big data or, all of these things that I find become increasingly important to know about, or at least know people who know about these things in the future. It's becoming more and more logical to have this knowledge and to draw on it to better your projects.
100%. I mean, I think, whenever, like in an era of Silicon Valley startups, the nerds sitting behind the computer that understand coding and how to leverage analytics and leverage data, and how the Zuckerbergs and those type of guys are becoming the bosses and the moguls. I think that should be apparent to people of it's the world. I think is really catered to people who understand those type of skills, and it's easy in a film school if you're a student who's like the big shot director, golden boy, golden girl in film school as a director or cinematographer or whatever. It's really easy to kind of have an arrogance about that, and I see that all the time in students. And listen, they're 18, 19. I mean, of course, they're going to they don't that's just part of being a dumb 20-year-old, But if they would take the time to see the 3 or 4 kids sitting in like the dark room with their computers, like typing away and pecking away, and they don't talk to anybody because they're all working on an app or working on an animation project or working on the big data and the analytics and all the coding and all that stuff. If they would take the time to reach out and have an authentic connection with those people, that will be a tremendous asset as they move forward. Because as we see, Silicon Valley, just the general entertainment space overall, there's such an amazing changeover where now, Paramount Pictures and Warner Brothers and all the traditional film studio, there's this tremendous changeover of now AT&T buying Warner Brothers, Amazon buying Whole Foods, with Hulu, Apple, Netflix ruling the world, and in every way possible. The people that have the companies that have that Silicon Valley big data mindset, they're now changing over the industry in Hollywood. And so all of a sudden, it's not going to be just about the hotshot director. It's going to be, how do you leverage big data and analytics to be able to become an asset that augments the filmmaking process rather than just the film itself. And so the more you know, and the more people in that space, I think is not just an extra benefit. I think that's quickly becoming a necessary thing for film students to understand.
It's a complex future filled with possibilities and challenges, and it's quite wonderful, I think, even though it's challenging. Houston, thank you so much for this talk, and I look forward to having you on board on future episodes of this podcast. Cheers.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.